everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I will be making a new art piece and playing around with the new Arrtx 36 acrylic marker set. Arrtx were once again kind enough to send me one of their products for free, and I will be giving an unbiased review of my first impressions and experience. So just to be clear, I have not been sponsored or paid by Arrtx, and these are my personal unbiased opinions. Without further ado, grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's get right into it. The new Arrtx acrylic marker set comes in a box of 36 markers. On the back you can see the color swatches and some information on how to best use these pens. Little side note, but I love how bright and spring-like the packaging is. I think it fits the colors from the set really well. When opening the box, you'll firstly see 18 colors. You can lift the tray they come in up to reveal the rest of the colors. All pens are labeled, well, in my case all except for one, but it's just one of them, so I still know which color it is, so it's fine. The markers themselves have this super cute flower pattern from which you can see the paint from within the marker, and each marker comes with a matching marker cap. When swatching each color, I found that the colors matched the caps actually really well. They didn't, however, match the colors from the box very well, in my opinion. So I do advise you to make a swatch test first, before actually using these markers in a piece. This way you can really get a feel for how each color looks. They state on the packaging to shake the pens well before using them, especially when using them for the first time or if you haven't used them in a while. Before using each pen, I shook them a bit. So far they seem to be working as intended. What I love though is how you can actually see the paint flow through the pens after shaking. You can see it through this flower pattern. I thought it was so cute to see little bubbles flow. These markers have a brush nib, and so far I found that they feel quite versatile or bendy and easy to use. They feel very smooth and flowy. Not really sure how else to describe it, but I hope the smoothness of the nibs comes across on camera. The colors themselves are very bright and have a very strong coverage. When I use them in my sketchbook, I found that they don't bleed through the paper, which I love. It makes it very easy to keep using both sides of each page of the sketchbook. Each color also dries pretty quickly, which also makes them really easy and beginner-friendly to use. I personally tend to forget paint can literally just be wet sometimes. I think that is because I have worked as a digital artist for a long time, so I sometimes forget that paint has to dry and it can leave a real mess. So it comes in really handy for me that these markers dry as quickly as they do. Like I said before, the colors are very opaque and flat looking, giving a nice graphic art style and kind of vibe. In my opinion, these colors work best on their own, just like the way they flow out of the pen. I found that blending the colors to create a gradient, for example, was quite difficult. I think this is because they dry so quickly. You would have to be really fast to try to blend the different colors together, and that was something I seemed to be too slow to be able to do. I also didn't really want to mix the colors using the marker nibs themselves, because I feel like the nibs can get quite messy because of it, and I don't want multiple colors on one nib. I felt like that would make it quite messy, and yeah, I would say try this at your own risk. I personally won't be using these to try and blend colors. They layer amazingly though. Because of how opaque they are, they can very easily layer the lighter colors on top of the darker ones and still get a very even layer of paint. I found that it was very easy to fix small mistakes in your drawing this way, which gives way more room for experimentation and just fun drawing, in my opinion. After using the markers to color in larger parts of the drawing, I found that the paint might flow out a bit less, as if they've become a bit dried up. But if you shake the marker again, more paint will come out again. When the marker feels a bit more dry, you can get a less opaque layer of paint. And I personally use this as a technique to give colors a lighter shade, for example. And if I wanted to use the full opaqueness of said color again, I'll just shake the marker and it's back to normal. It's super easy. Here I'll be making a more detailed piece with the Arrtx markers and colored pencils. Whenever I illustrate traditionally, I tend to want to mix mediums, so I thought this would be a good way to showcase how I would use these markers in my personal art pieces. First thing I do is make a light sketch of what I intend to draw. I first made some little thumbnail sketches in my sketchbook to see what composition I would like best, and now I'm sort of transferring said thumbnail sketch to a bigger piece of paper. This set has a lot of natural tones, a few greens, browns, yellows and blues. And this inspired me to make a drawing that's a lot more nature focused, since I thought that would work really well with this set. I also snuck some not so naturey colors in there, like light pinks and purples. I mainly did this to make the drawing feel a bit more fairy tale-like, soft and dreamy. And it just, I don't know, spices the colors up a bit. I often enjoy using colors in little details that wouldn't necessarily be present in like real-life counterparts of that scene. In the middle I drew a bear, of course. If there's one thing you should know about me, it's that I love bears. My default setting when I start sketching is to draw bears, so naturally I added one here. I just couldn't help myself. After the sketch was done, I added my first layer. And I think you call this an underpainting, not entirely sure. But I do this to make the colors blend together more in the final result. And if there are slight gaps in between colors, you'll see the color of the underpainting instead of the plain white of like the paper I'm drawing on. For the trees, I added a purple shade underneath the parts where there would be more shadows. This way, when I layer the brown shades on top, they would look a bit darker in those places than if I were to just place down the brown shades there on their own. In some parts, the result of this is a little bit more obvious than others, but yeah, honestly for me, drawing this piece was also just one big experiment. For a long while, when drawing, I felt like it went through an ugly stage and I just had to trust the process in hopes that it would turn out the way I intended it to. And the more details I started to add, eventually everything started to come together. But at first it's really important to lay out the base colors and work from big to small to get a great balance within the colors and level of detail. So after working on this for about 6 hours, I wasn't that big of a fan of the result. I often have this when staring at my own work for long periods of time. I can see every single detail and mistake, and I find it hard to see the bigger picture. I was thinking of maybe adding some black line art to give some more contrast in parts where I felt I wasn't able to get enough contrast with the markers and pencils themselves. But at that point I was kind of tired for the day and decided to call it quits. If I were to add line art, I would do it the next day with a more fresh mindset. And after I woke up the next day, I thought the piece looked fine as it is. I then actually did really enjoy how it turned out and felt way more happy about it than the day before. I also didn't really feel the need to add line art, and I just was kind of over it at that point. I had already spent so much time on it, so I just left it as it is. When comparing these to the previous acrylic markers I received from Arrtx, they seem very similar. It might even be the same substance as the other ones, I'm not entirely sure, but they feel almost the same to me. And I really enjoyed the previous markers that I received from them. They've become a staple within my art supplies, so that says a lot. If you're interested to see how I tested those markers, I made a review on them as well, which you can watch right here. I'll try to put something up to click on. Future Aiko, get onto it. But back to these markers. The way I found that these differ from the other Arrtx markers, apart from the packaging of course, is the ink flow. Due to the better ink flow, the coverage / opaqueness feels a lot stronger. For the other markers, they advise to store the pens with the nib downwards to get the best ink flow. And with these markers, they advise you to just shake the pen. I personally wasn't that big of a fan of how you had to store the other markers with the nib down, because I was a bit paranoid of ink leakage. So I really enjoy this change of the new markers. Oh, and another thing, you don't have to manually stick on every sticker name with these new markers. That makes me very happy. With the previous ones, I spent a lot of time sticking the colored stickers to the pen caps before I could just use them. And they fixed that with these. So yeah, that makes me very happy. These are a bit more expensive per marker as the other acrylic marker sets from Arrtx. And I think that's mainly because of the more advanced ink flow mechanism that's built in within the markers. Other than markers from Arrtx themselves, I would most closely compare them to Posca pens. They both have very bright colors within their range that can be applied very evenly and give this very flat looking art style. From my understanding, you can also use both markers on various different surfaces, like glass, ceramics, and so on. But I've personally only used both markers on paper, so I'll just stick with what I know. The Arrtx markers have a brush nib, while most Posca markers have a rounded nib. To activate a Posca pen, you first have to shake and pump the nibs to get the ink flow going, while with these Arrtx pens you just have to shake them. I find both very easy to apply, and both don't bleed through regular sketchbook paper. This set of the Arrtx markers costs about $38.99 USD or €39.99 for 36 markers. As of this moment, this version of the markers can only be bought in a set, so it can still be a little bit of an investment, but in my opinion, it's a great, cheaper alternative for the Posca markers. And in my opinion, the quality really compares nicely with the price. A little tip. Arrtx does offer single markers, but only the regular acrylic markers so far. And if you want to know more about those, I will once again recommend you the previous review I did. There I go more into depth about those markers. If you'd like to experiment with markers or acrylics, I think these could be a lot of fun. They're fun for both experienced and beginner artists, and I also think they could be a very fun gift to give to someone who might want to get into art. Also, a fun fact, I edited this out, but the washi tape was becoming the bane of my existence after about the 4-hour mark or something. Like, washi tapes aren't that sticky anyway, but this one just didn't stick at all anymore and it got super annoying. The paper kept sliding down from the board and I was debating just drawing directly on the table for a while, but I already committed to drawing on this board, so I just kept going. I have since gotten more used to drawing on a board like this, and I'm really happy about that. It's really great for my posture, and I get less neck pains from sitting up more straight, obviously. What I do notice is that my arm and wrist did really start to ache after a few hours, but I think that's more to do with me just not taking any breaks than it has to do with the artboard itself. So, little tip, don't be like me and take breaks after like every 15 minutes or so. I try to remember doing this myself, but once I get into the flow of a drawing, I sometimes just zone out and completely draw for several hours on end. Only stopping when my body really starts to hurt, so don't do that. Something that has been on my mind lately is how much I've been enjoying traditional art again. I've spent most of my years developing my artistic skills digitally, using Photoshop or Procreate. So it kind of surprises me how I kind of only want to draw traditionally as of lately. For those of you that don't know, I have recently opened up my own art shop where I design and illustrate my own products. And for some of the products I've put up on my shop, I basically had to draw them digitally. When doing that, I really noticed that my body just really didn't want to. I really didn't feel like it. I just wanted to draw traditionally. But I've been reflecting on why that might be. And I think it might be because the digital landscape is changing so much right now. With how much generative AI is in the news, it really makes me want to go back to really like feeling my art, feeling the pen on paper, making mistakes I can't always easily erase, creating textures with crayons or paint or just the paper texture itself. It makes art feel so much more real, almost like feel the artist making the piece. Yeah, I've been really craving that after everything. I've also been loving the imperfections that come with the traditional mediums. Whenever I draw digitally, I can sometimes get really sucked into trying to make everything perfect, simply because the undo button is also just one click away, so that sometimes makes me feel like I can always do better, and I get into this sort of perfectionism cycle. I will then put too much pressure on myself to make every drawing the best it can be, and that can sometimes really take the fun out of just drawing. And now, with generative AI, it also just takes the fun out of drawing digitally for me. Don't get me wrong, I still love Arrtx and other artists that create digitally. But for personal inspiration, I have noticed that lately I've been gravitating a lot more towards traditional mediums. So I'm kind of wondering, do any of you experience this as well? I'm really curious about this. I would love to have a conversation about it. And another thing, also maybe a fun fact, when starting to build up my artistic brand in a way, I was researching how I wanted to market myself on social media, like choosing a username. And at first I wanted to create like a brand name. I came up with the name Graven for a while. This was inspired by my last name, but it really didn't have a deep meaning to it or anything. I just thought it sounded kind of cool. But not long after, I changed my artistic name / username to just be my given name. I did this because I felt like a lot of also well-known artists do this. They just use their own names for their work. And I felt like this would also make it a lot easier to be able to find me and my work online. But before I made that decision, I was thinking of using the username iArt for a bit. Yeah, my name is Aiko, and I just the first two letters of my first name. I also means love in Japanese, and I thought that would be a really wholesome and cute fit for the art that I make. But now I'm so glad I didn't choose that username. That would have been disastrous for my branding with all the generative AI stuff going on right now. So I'm really happy I just went with my own full name instead. I'm not gonna go too deep into this since I don't feel like I can properly express my thoughts about it in a coherent way. But I do know that AI is harming the creative industry in a big way, and that makes me really upset. So I'm really not a fan of generative AI. And that's all I'm going to say for now. I did see this video a while back from a YouTuber, Drew Gooden. He brings up many great points in this video regarding generative AI, and I would actually really recommend you watch that. I personally watched it while making a little drawing. If you're a freak like me who has to watch YouTube videos while working as well, here's a recommendation. And also shout out to you if you're listening to this while drawing yourself right now. Let me know if you do, because I love that thought. I think that's all I have to yap about for now. I'll put up some music in the background and I'll come back to talk a little bit towards the end of the video. So enjoy the rest of the drawing process. And we're almost done with this piece. I'm quite happy with how it turned out, and I had a great time playing around with the Arrtx markers. I hope you had a great time watching this video as well. I'll definitely be using the Arrtx markers more often. I love using them within my sketchbooks and I can't wait to make more silly little drawings with them. Also, once again, thank you to Arrtx for sending me these markers, and thank you, my dear viewer, for watching this video. If you'd like to support this channel, you can like this video, leave a comment, or perhaps watch another video of mine. That would really help me out. If you'd like to stay up to date on new videos, you can subscribe to my channel or even sign up to my newsletter. The link for that will be in the description along with my other social media links. And yeah, that's about it. I hope the rest of your day will be lovely, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye!